This episode has been brought to you in partnership with thesextalk.com, a comprehensive video course to help parents have the sex talk with their kids. Use coupon code NAKEDGOSPEL to receive 5% off.
So let me ask you a very unsettling question. How many devices do you have in your house right now that access the internet? That should freak you out a little bit.
Most of the issues in their life they can just handle. They have not gone up against pornography.
The average age of exposure is between the ages of 8 and 11 years old.
We ourselves are often nervous about having the conversations with our kids.
Listen, parent, I want you to understand right now, your child is being formed by the culture.
If we say nothing, we're throwing our kids to the wolves.
We're going to take a journey that might be a bit uncomfortable.
I want to own the conversation.
Because I think it's probably just a fact that if your children have eyes that function, that they will see pornography. So what are we going to do when our kids see porn?
What is the only proper response to that question?
Before kids have their sexual templates hijacked by pornography, we need to arm them with a defense against it.
For your kids' sake, but also for your sake, you're worth it.
It doesn't have to be perfect.
Discipleship is not something we outsource.
It's not just about biology, it's about theology.
God has raised you up for such a time as this, as the best person possible.
Visit thesextalk.com and use promo code NAKEDGOSPEL to receive 5% off. That's thesextalk.com, coupon code NAKEDGOSPEL for 5% off.
Hello and welcome to The Naked Gospel, where we have conversations about sex, singleness, marriage, pornography, and everything in between. We bring on cultural thinkers, parents, important folk, and normal folk alike. I am your host, Shane O'Neill. If you're listening in, video versions of all of these episodes are available at YouTube, Proven Ministries. We have that below. If you're watching and you just rather listen in, then all of these episodes are available on every major podcast platform. Whether you're listening or watching, do subscribe and continue to track with us. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. Really looking forward to this conversation. As you know, I really enjoy interviewing pastors who are willing to discuss this stuff, and very few of them are. We haven't actually been able to get many on, but today we do. So I'm just really looking forward to that. Do want to continue to invite you guys to join the Disruptor Initiative. You get this sweet mug amongst other things. I think it's $5 a month. The link will be down below. Really grateful for all of you who support us, obviously not just financially, but with your time and your attention and your feedback. All of it's very meaningful. We want to be intentional with these conversations, so continue to give us your feedback. We got a disruptor from Northern Ireland, our furthest disruptor. So thank you for joining our team. I will not say his name because I did not ask for permission. But grateful for all of you. And today we are joined by Pastor Will. Will, thank you for being with us today, man. Share a thing or two about yourself, and yeah.
I am a pastor. I've been doing, I started off in men's ministry, and now I've moved into kind of ministering to everyone. I'm married. I have a 7-year-old who's super cool. He's a big baseball. Actually, he's really good at baseball, which he did not get from me. I read a lot. I work out a lot. I'm pretty boring these days, actually.
What do you like to read?
All kinds of stuff. What am I reading now? 12 Unremarkable Men by John MacArthur. I'm reading right now. And there's a new book that came out called I'm sorry, the author is escaping me, but it's called Attacking Anxiety. It's pretty good.
That's cool.
So I read a couple of books at the same time and just jump around a little bit.
Yeah, I'm similar. I'm similar in that way. How long have you been a pastor?
like a pastor over a church since last September. And then I've been doing men's ministry stuff for about, well, it was before 4 or 5 years.
Nice. Very nice. Has pastoring, getting into the pastorate post-COVID, is there kind of a different sort of posturing or protocol when it comes to that? I really don't know how much COVID has impacted how we gather, how we do church. So has it impacted at all?
I think it depends on the congregation. I mean, for me, when I decided, well, I didn't decide, God decided. When God called me to the pastorate, and I kind of fought it for 4 or 5 years, and just kept telling God, it's okay, I'm doing enough. I really, and my wife and I, well, both of us were very intentional on making sure that the situation was right for the church and for us. So we actually turned down a couple of churches because it just, for whatever reason, theologically or what have you, wasn't the right fit. It's not, every job is important, but this particular job, it really is about fit and making sure that you're on, especially theologically, you're on the same page, because if you're not theologically on the same page, then you're in trouble right out of the gate.
Yeah.
But post-COVID, the church is in a real bad spot leadership wise. I mean, that's probably a longer conversation.
Yeah.
We need leaders in the churches, not just pastors, but lay leaders. And I don't even like saying lay leaders, but people just to step up and lead, especially after COVID, because at least in Northern Virginia, I've seen a few churches really struggle after COVID with numbers, and they're in some, they'll have to make decisions. And then I saw the other day in Massachusetts, like a 200-year-old church has closed its doors. The church has been there since like forever.
Yeah.
It's gone now. It's not gone, but the congregation's gone.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking. They just didn't recover after COVID. So church is in a kind of, I think I look on the bright side and say, this is our chance to bring biblical Christianity back and really get out to the masses, and kind of set up the church how we want it set up after, kind of a reset, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, Will, what is your, I don't know, analysis, your thoughts when it comes to, because we're talking about church and theology, totally on the same page with you. But there's this real sort of disconnect for seemingly leaders, well, maybe just being human, but like leaders and parishioners when it comes to believing right and living right. So when you and your family are looking at like a church with, a theology that you believe represents the Jesus way, but then is there a further step of saying like, well, then how do they live this out? How do they practice being a faith family? Or what does that sort of lens look like?
Yeah, it's the old pastor's joke, right? The reason kids don't come back to church is because after church, the parents were cursing at each other on the way back home.
Exactly. Yeah.
You have to. It starts at the top with the leaders, and you have to. For me, it's all about living out as best I can Scripture and having people feel the same way, and really developing a zeal for Jesus, because it's so much more than Sunday. And, my whole goal for this last year has been equipping the saints. So I've been trying to do all my sermons, all my small groups targeted toward living it out more and more in your life, because people just cut themselves short on their own faith, and they don't do it intentionally most of the time. But, there's this awesome feeling about following the will of God that people just miss. And it's so sad.
Yeah, no, I know you've been very, as you mentioned, even as Jesus was calling and calling and calling you into the pastorate, that first step was just being present to men. Well, I guess let's kind of start at the beginning. What's sexual integrity looked like for your life? And then we'll get into what it's looked like for you to be with other men in that space?
So for me, well, my first attempt at it was, so I went to a military school and then I was active duty for 7.5 years. So 11.5 years total. So my first attempt was to do the old discipline. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to lace up my bootstraps, and because that's what I knew. And it would work for a little bit of time.
You're talking when it comes to like pornography, integrity. Sexual. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like sexual integrity, it would work, and I would be sober or what have you, or clean, however you want to put it, for not a significant amount of time, but it worked for like a week or two.
Sure.
It's not about managing the sin as much as it is, I love Christ more, and I'm going to fill my time with godly things. And that's worked way, way better. And then it also came down to understanding the real depth and scope of my own sin. I wish I would have saved this article, but a number of years ago, I read an article about how if you view pornography, you are complicit in human trafficking. And it went into stats, and it went into different types of abuse that these young women go through. And it just rocked my whole world, because I never thought about it like that. I never thought, the misnomer that we put on sexual sin is that it's private, especially with men in pornography, that it's private and we do it in the dark in our after everyone's gone to sleep, but it's not private. It is very much affecting people that we have no idea even exist.
Yeah.
In huge, unimaginable ways. And that just rocked my world when I read that. And I thought about, so in the book of Joshua, you had Achan right after the battle of Jericho, and he took that gold. And I guarantee you, he didn't think anybody was going to find out or anything was going to happen if he took that gold, other than he would be rich.
Yeah.
And then they go to the next battle at Ai, and lots of people die, and they lose the battle directly because of him. And that's the same thing when we look at pornography. We're trying to get dopamine hits or satisfy some sort of desire, but it's affecting much more people, particularly our families as well, because as good as you think you are at hiding and being like sneaky on your phone, you slip up eventually. I had someone tell me one time that you can humble yourself before God, or God can humble you. And I unfortunately did not take his advice, and I learned the hard way that God can humble you. So that's why I started doing men's ministry, was to help more, because especially in the church, we need men to be leaders. God has a role for each of us. And, it's more than just coming and sitting in a pew on Sunday. And it may not even be at the church. It might be somewhere in the community you're called to. So helping build up men is where I started, leading a men's group. And then it kind of grew. And then we had a couple, like 3 groups a week. So yeah, that's how I started in men's ministry, was small groups. It's kind of my wheelhouse.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So you were mentioning earlier about, okay, so you saw your sin and you would try and just grit your way through it, and you'd get a week or two, and it's not long, but it's just enough time to make you think it might actually work eventually. Yeah. And so you perpetuate that pattern, and that's true in my own life as much as yours. So eventually you came to a place where you started, instead of looking at the sin you wanted to get rid of and fighting really, really vigilantly against it, you started looking in the other direction. Like, okay, like I obviously feel like crap afterwards, which means my heart has been changed. My heart is redeemed. I'm just looking in the wrong direction. And so you pivoted, and all of a sudden you started looking at the good, the true, the beautiful. You started looking at Jesus. And then you also started, instead of living and fighting in isolation, maybe, I don't want to use, I mean, the word that comes to mind is battling, but it's kind of, I don't know, submitting, knowing relationships. Because if pornography is about broken relationships and isolation, then doing any sort of redemptive work in a room by yourself, like if that's all you're doing, then it's not going to work. So what I liked about it is not just looking in the right direction, but then traveling with other people in the right direction. Was I hearing you right?
Yeah, you have to do it. Well, the church needs to be a community. You know, when you go to church, you should feel welcomed and you should know people. And I mean, unless it's your first time, but it should be a family. And
yeah,
you have to be vulnerable and honest with people to move forward. And that's, you know, you look at Acts, that's what they did. You look at the early church history and all the persecution, that's how they did it. And we're under persecution now. It's different. And more churches need to talk about the pornography issue, because there's really not a lot of resources, unfortunately, in your standard church. I mean, that's a blanket statement. There are some that have it, but generally speaking, it's not there.
Well, if a pastor's listening to this, and he struggles, and it's just in the dark. He's alone. He hasn't shared it. What are kind of first steps? Because there's a huge stigma around. I mean, like if I were to watch porn right now, I would be really, really scared of what I would lose. And that would be something I'd have to like actively engage if I watch porn right now, because I'd have to overcome that. And it's so much bigger for pastors. So where are you at with that? You know, just one, initially just speaking to a person in that context, but then also speaking to pastors and their inability to actually just be human.
Yeah, that's hard, right?
Yeah.
That's really hard, because it's not, like I said before, it's not like a regular job, you know? And it's a calling. And when you have, and pastors do struggle, by the way. There's plenty of stats out there that show it's a fair number too, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
And you have to take a first step somewhere. I would hope you have some sort of mentor in your life that you can go to. That would be my first step. That's what I did I wasn't a full-time pastor at the time like I am now, but you know, I was able to go to a mentor and say, hey, look, I just have to confess this. I can't do this. And I don't want to do it anymore. And unfortunately for pastors, that's where a lot of people are, is I don't want to do this anymore, but I don't know what to do, because if I say something to if you have an elder board, like I do here, like, you know, I risk, you know, my income, I risk my calling. And then there's the stigma attached to you following, you know, an ousting. If you are ousted, I mean, I guess too, it depends on your elder board. And I guess it depends on how far into the sin you've gone.
For sure.
Because there's obviously different levels, right?
For sure.
But I would reach out to a mentor first. And there's plenty of places like Proven Ministries. You guys do an amazing job. And there's a few others out there that can help pastors. And then there's like counseling services that, you know, you pay for, your insurance pays for. But you have to get some sort of counseling and some sort of help and some sort of confession where you feel comfortable and safe and you can get everything out.
Yeah. For many of us, the issue starts when we're quite young. And so it grows up with us. Was that the case for you?
Yeah. So I was, I lived with my mom and my grandparents. My dad left when I was quite young. So living with your grandparents, it's the same thing today. They're not quick on technology. So we didn't get the internet. Actually, I didn't have cable TV for a long time either, but we didn't get the internet until I was like 13 or 14, and it had been out for a little while. But this is the AOL days. I'm not too old, but I'm a little old. So we had a computer that you had to use, no smartphones. And I had a friend over to stay the night. And then he kind of showed me this whole world on the internet that I had no idea. And unfortunately, that kicked off about 2-decade long struggle with some sporadic sobriety here and there, but generally speaking, about 2 decades. And then I had built up this fantasy land in my head. Like I had built up like this whole other life in my head. And my wife had found out on my phone a number of years ago. My wife, for whatever reason, looked at my phone, and for whatever reason, like I said before, you're not as slick as you think you are.
Yeah.
And after that, I had kind of had a mental breakdown a little bit because this whole fantasy thing that I built up in my head was fake. And that's what I try to tell people too about the internet. Like it's not real. I mean, it's kind of real, but not really. It's very fake. But you attach real feelings to it. And then I ended up, actually a therapist kind of saved my life a little bit. She had recognized in me that some other things were happening in my head. Then I went to a psychiatrist, and I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and panic disorder, which just means I get panic attacks. And then I had to I've been to 4 different doctors now, so it's been verified.
Bless you, dude.
But again, God humbled me. But I would have never gone to a doctor for that kind of thing had not all of this stuff happened. So again, God works through everything. Even when he's humbling us, even when he's disciplining us. I went to that doctor and sure enough, it was more going on than just an addiction.
How important do you think it is? So a lot of Christians really do approach this issue as it is. It's like sin management or behavior management, and unfortunately, we can use Scripture well enough to actually like try and validate that. Sort of like, the devil used Scripture to try and tempt Jesus. Like the Word of God can be wielded in demonic ways and really, really beat up broken ways. So what does it look like to like actually kind of look under the hood, so to speak, of those issues and say like, oh, like it's a hard issue. It's also a brokenness issue, like it's not just like what I do, but also things that were done to me. And these stories I believe in my head that I try and like all this time I've been trying to live out in pornography or satisfy or medicate with pornography. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, you have to really get down to any sin, you have to get down to the root, and particularly sexual sin, because it probably started way before you think it did. And yeah, it manifests and it gets out of control. But like for me, my dad left when I was in 1st grade, and I'll be honest, I didn't get over that for a long time.
Yeah.
Even as a Christian, I quote unquote forgave him, but that was more like you were saying, just because that's what Jesus said to do. So I'm like, okay, I forgive you, but I didn't really.
Right.
I have now, but so mine was about abandonment. So for example, that's why I liked pornography and chat rooms and stuff, because nobody was going anywhere. We were all lonely, everybody, and it was always there, no matter what. Particularly when smartphones came around, and I got my first one of those. And then, as technology has gone on, it's gotten more and more dangerous. But the problem is it's not real. So what we're doing is escaping our own brokenness and escaping our own world for something that's fake and been built by engineers and whoever. And it's painful to look at the truth, which is what you need to do. And once you get through it, it's much better on the other side, because again, so like one thing I don't like that some people say is like, well, you need to put up like bumpers on the highway and you don't go this far over. I don't want to be on that highway at all. I don't want the bumpers. I want to go the other way.
Right.
So that's how kind of where I focused my own recovery was, I'm going the other way. I'm going to watch there are some like management parts of it, right? I watch, I take care of what kind of media I intake. When I go to the gym, I put my hat down low and just get my workout in. And, there's some things I do that are kind of sin management stuff. But generally speaking, I want to be on the other road. I want to fill my time with writing. I do a decent amount of writing, fill a time with my family, which, I almost lost. So I have a greater appreciation for that. And, I look at what I didn't have as a kid, and I try to do the opposite so that my son has a good life. And then part of that is, I know a ton about Pokemon. I don't particularly like Pokemon.
That's awesome.
I know a lot about it.
That's cool.
So it's just filling your time with godly things. When you focus on your sin, the problem is your mind is already there. And once you start thinking about it, and then you make a plan, and as soon as you make a plan, it's pretty much over at that point.
Yeah, I hear you on all that. I appreciate you sharing it too. Would you take a moment and just share some of the things that? So first off, I think it's worth just reiterating, because you raise a really good point of like kind of what's your motive, what's your intent. If you're going to the gym, so it's cool because somebody could do the exact same action as you, like like stay in the zone, but their motivation is maybe something like, I don't want to look at like filth, or I don't want to be tempted, whatever. And it's just like, well, that's like pornography dehumanizes. And so you're trying to overcome that by dehumanizing. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to put a hat on so that I can honor the people around me and so that I can honor the temple that God has given me. Right. And those are like really different motives. The action's the same, right? The behavior is the same. The intent, the posturing of the heart is just drastically different. So I really like what you're saying. I think that I just think it's important. I think it has a lot of legs. What were some things that you've spoken about family? I just want to know, what were some things that your spouse did that were kind of humbled you in redemptive ways? What were some of the things that you needed to hear, that you needed to face? You talk about almost losing your family. I think that's a huge fear for a lot of people, and it keeps us from sharing things that are poison in our soul.
Yeah, you can't. One thing I've had to learn across my mental health issues and then the addiction stuff is you can't be double-minded. As much as you think you can do, I had a boss when I was in the secular world. I used to run managed a company, and my boss was really, really smart. And one time he told me this because I was multitasking, and he said to me, "Will, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to do this and this and this." And he's like, "You're just doing a bunch of stuff really poor." I was like, "Okay."
That's good.
Yeah, he was really smart. He made a decent amount of money for himself. He was smart. And
integrous.
He had really simple. Yeah, he had really simple advice like that. It's the same thing in life. You can't, if you're making a plan all day about what you're going to do at night, and you go home or whatever, and you hope your spouse is asleep, or you hope she goes out for a girls' night, or you volunteer to do something, but you're really going to do something else. You're living a double-minded life, and you build up, again, this fakeness that's not real. And then you end up missing a lot. So what really hurt me when she kind of like, when we had our kind of falling out, was all the small stuff that I missed that a good husband would have figured out. Like, when she was having a bad day, or, she just needed like a small gift from like, whatever, like a Coke or something, like small things that I wasn't picking up on as a husband. That's what hurt me the most, because I realized like, oh, I was so distracted by this other thing that I was just missing small stuff. Now, of course, there was the big, issue of what I was doing, but it was the small. So that's what I try to do now as a husband, is just find small ways every day to show her that, hey, I love you, we did do couples therapy for a little bit. I would suggest that for most everybody, even if you're not having problems.
Sure. Yeah.
Because you kind of learn more than you think you would.
Yeah.
We did, at least. But yeah, it was the little stuff like that. And same thing with my son. It was little stuff like that. So I would take him to like the store and like buy him toys and stuff, because that's what my dad did the few times he was in my life. And then one day I realized that my son doesn't draw pictures of us going to Target and buying Legos. He draws pictures of us playing baseball and stuff. So it's, you have to live a full Christian life, and you can't do it double-minded. And, you just have to choose, unfortunately. And sometimes it's hard. And the pornography addiction is really difficult. Rewires your brain. You have to go through a lot, but you can do it.
Yeah, that's really good, Will. Because when we have quarantine pockets that aren't integrated, it's literally it's a disintegrated way of living. Which is synonymous with integrity. It's, if you're living integrous, you're living an integrated life, which is just holistic. So I really like what you're saying. I think it's powerful. So I'd be curious, as a pastor who has worked through this stuff. You work through this stuff with other people, and again, it's I want to avoid making it sound like sexual integrity is a one and done. Learning how to, right? Because we frame sexual integrity as like what you shouldn't do. But if it's learning to actually humanize people, live in relationship, be vulnerable, see one another and be seen, that's a lifelong journey, and it's a really, really cool one. There's no embarrassment in that. It's dignifying. So I want to make sure that I don't want to polarize my language. So when you, as somebody who has worked through it and continue to work through it, you're a pastor as well. And you look at just the culture around us, when you look at specifically Christian culture, and you see other leaders and you hear, the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention recently, a few weeks ago. Hundreds and thousands, and Johnny Hunt, like all sorts of people who have just fallen, and they hit it, and they thought that they could move on, like we were talking about earlier. And it's a disintegrated and disintegrous way of living. What is something that you wish, that you long to give? Like, what is something that is being birthed in you, or has been birthed in you, where it's like, okay, you see these things, like what goes through your head, what goes through your heart Yeah.
We have to return to being zealous for God. And it's especially pastors. Matter of fact, the book of James tells us, don't be a teacher because you're held to a higher standard. And, you know, yeah, we all have struggles. It's not but it's about being biblical and being humble and realizing that we're servants. We're not, you know, the church that I'm in my office right now. This isn't my office. All of this is God's. If God decides that I'm not a pastor anymore, I will go back to work. But we have to be serious about it, like really serious and really devout, and show people the awesomeness of living with God. All this stuff we've done to ourselves. You know, you look at the culture and you wonder why young people leave the church. Well, you know, thousands of people reported abuse and it didn't get anything happen.
Yeah.
Why would you go there? Yeah. It takes personal invites and discipleship and being part of people's lives more than just.
It's for you, Will.
Sorry, I forgot to turn this off. And it takes more than just, you know, it's not mentorship. Somebody told me one time, it's not about putting someone on your calendar. It's about someone joining your calendar. And that's what Christ is supposed to be like. That's what Christ did, right? He didn't have a calendar invite for Peter to come over tomorrow morning and talk about, you know, the gospel. Peter lived with him. Yeah. And, you know, I'm not saying everyone should come to my house and live with me, but
yeah,
it has to be that level. And we wonder why we lost people in the church. And it's because we stopped being biblical and we made idols out of all this stuff. And it's the same thing with sexual pornography. The secular world has made it an idol. It's a golden calf at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like when OnlyFans try to get rid of sex work on their website. Now, granted, they weren't doing it for any kind of moral reason. It was a credit card reason. But when they tried to do it, people flipped out like they were persecuting someone. And that's why it's normalized. It's part of our society. So when you speak out against it, you're in the minority already. And then as pastors, you can Google, pastor scandal or whatever every day of the week, and something's going to pop up.
Yeah.
We have to be more serious, and we have to have leaders that are serious, and we have to have men and women that are vulnerable with each other, that build a community where people can actually become disciples of Christ, and that not just churchgoers.
Yeah, I love all of that. That's a podcast unto itself. I'm serious. I really, so I've always been struck by Paul's kind of identity demarcation, like in the beginning of every letter, like Paul, a bondservant, you know? And I was just thinking, like, the word pastor, at least today in our culture, has like prestige to it. But I mean, by the way Paul presents it, it's like, it would be more appropriate to say, like, instead of I'm the lead pastor, I'm the lead slave. You know, like I am lead servant of all, you know, and just like that language is so much more protecting than the sort of elevated language that we've embedded into the word pastor. And you're right. The sexual revolution with, it's led us to pornography, and it's continuing to lead us to, virtual pornography and sex bots and sex dolls, and it's already being embraced. And like I know people who have sex dolls, you know, like it's not some sort of futuristic thing. So I'm totally with you on that, and it just dehumanizes us. It doesn't actually liberate us. There's nothing liberating about it. Yeah, and then the community aspect. That's all of this is really beautiful. Will, I like it. It's a follow up for sure. Will, moving forward, do you see yourself continuing to? Well, actually, let me ask this question. If you're okay, let me end with this question. Mm-hmm. What is So where are you at with sexual sin disqualifying pastoral leadership? And as you mentioned earlier, like this comes on a scale. It's not just like, oh, I am sexually integrous or I'm not sexually integrous. It's like, well, no, there's a difference between like, hey, dude, after like 10 years, I watched pornography. I'm confessing. Versus for the last 10 years, I've been hiding that I've been watching pornography and occasionally fantasizing about women in our community. So there's a spectrum here for sure. There's a scale, but I'd be curious. How do you think through that?
For me, it's the biblical church discipline. Now for pastors, it's a little bit different because there could be liability issues for the organization as a whole, which is why people cover that stuff up, unfortunately.
Yeah. At least one of the reasons.
Yeah, one of the reasons. Yeah, for me, you may have to take a break, and it might be good for you to take a break.
Yeah.
Now, if you're committing adultery or you're, I mean, God forbid you're abusing someone, then yeah, you're done.
Yeah.
In my eyes, and you're never coming back.
Okay.
And you should be in jail.
Okay.
But like adultery and for me, it's following the biblical definition of discipline. So it would probably be a little bit different for each church, but I think at a minimum, some sort of break.
Yeah.
Is probably required, and you should go get help.
Yeah.
And you should take advantage of that break and pray. And if it's God's will, then you'll come back, and maybe it's in a different pulpit. But again, I try my best to be biblical. The Bible has the answers for everything. So I follow that model myself for discipline. When we talk about members in the church, it's the same kind of thing. Obviously not to the same scale, but so I think for pornography watching and things like that, it's probably dependent on what the elders pray about and what they come up with. And for adultery, you're probably going to lose your pulpit on that one. And then anything higher than that probably should just go find something else to do.
Yeah. Yeah. In some cases, go find somewhere else to live. Yeah, one with bars. So I like all of that. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for letting me ask. I know that's it's a big question, and it's a tender one too. Yeah. Well, just real quick, and we'll just end with this. What are just some of the key practices or disposition if there's somebody listening who would want to like lead a group, whether it's a pastor or, as you say, just a normal person? What are some of the key distinctives of just starting a group and some of the features within the group that you think really are kind of gospel elements that are revitalizing?
Yeah, I love small groups. I think small groups are the backbone of Christianity in the church. I lead 3 of them myself as a pastor. Honestly, the qualifications, just start a group.
Yeah.
If something is on your heart, whether it's men's purity or you want to start a workout. My friend owns a gym up. I'm pointing, but up the street, my friend owns a gym. Yeah. And he and I are going to do a men's group at the gym. We need more leaders to step up. Your qualification is, have you accepted Jesus Christ in your heart? Have you been baptized? Cool. You can start a group tomorrow. You just have to be bold and do it. And even if one person shows up, just do it. More people will show up, and more people will come, and it'll grow. I have never seen, at least in my experience, I haven't seen a small group not grow. So just don't get discouraged if one person shows up for a month. That's okay. Just keep going. Especially if God's put something on your heart, don't say no. I said no for a long time, and I try not to say no anymore. But do have some structure to the group. Don't let it be a free for all, because you'll never get anything done. Make sure people respect the leader. But just respect them, that he can take control of the group and put it back on point of topic of whatever you're discussing. That's a big one, because sometimes you go to a men's group and you're like, what are we doing? We're just all talking over each other. And try to have some sort of plan in place. Don't just wing it. Try to have either, I'm not a big fan of book studies, but that's just me. I know a lot of people are. I try not to spend money or have people spend money, so I don't do a lot of book studies, but just pick a book out of the Bible and start. That's how I started.
That's cool. No, thanks for giving that to us, Will. I like all of that. I think that's a good place to stop. It is worth saying that I know it's your context, but anyone who's listening who is a female could do this with other females. This is not gender specific in any way. I think all the things that Will just gave us are applicable in that direction. I assume you would agree, Pastor Will?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm a big fan of mixed groups too, but if you're doing some sort of purity thing, just my opinion, it needs to be gender specific group, small group, because people won't be as likely to share. But
no, that's helpful.
Yeah. Same thing you can take everything I said and just switch the gender. It's fine.
Very cool. And it's cool to hear you say just mixed groups, just gatherings, as you said earlier, like God's family gathering together regularly. I like all of that. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I know you write in a few spots, and there's a new writing spot coming up. Would you share that with us? And then also how we can be praying for you?
Let's see. I've been writing for renew.org for, I should know that, like 3 or 4 years. I started off doing mental health stuff, and then I kind of branched out doing some other stuff. But there's mental health stuff on there. There's stuff about habitual sin. Renew is a really cool discipleship organization in Tennessee, but they're across the country. They have all kinds of books, and you know what's awesome about them? They have a lot of free resources. They have free books you can get. And then, I'll be writing for Proven Ministries coming up soon.
Yes, that is cool. Prayer request.
Oh yeah, prayer request. Let's see here. Just prayer for wisdom for the future of my own church, as we, post-COVID has been interesting. So, as we talked about at the very beginning, it's been interesting getting people back in church after you started streaming everything for free.
Yeah. Within 2 years, we entered a whole new milieu, which is wild. Yeah. The sort of change we saw in 2 years usually takes place in 20. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being with us. I really am grateful for this. You are the second pastor who's ever joined us in this scene. And it is so meaningful to me because, these are the spiritual leaders and authorities, yet very few of them are willing to. Everyone's willing to share with us what the Bible says. They're just not willing to share with us what their lives have looked like. And so I'm really grateful that you would come to share not just your thoughts, but your life with us.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Paul shared some stuff. So, the sermon, when I do sermons, they're not about me, but I'll share stuff. It's part of it.
Amen. I think that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, that's the embodied gospel, right? It is living out in real time incarnational truth. So thank you. I think the example is obviously bearing fruit in your own community, and that encourages, at least that encourages me. So thank you for being with us. Really grateful for you.
Thank you so much. It was fun.
Yeah. Folks, thank you for joining us. Really grateful to be able to have a conversation like this. If you want to hear more conversations with pastors, or if you want other topics covered, do let me know. You can throw it in if you're on YouTube, you can throw it in the comments. Otherwise, you're welcome to shoot me an email. Reviews are welcome. We're grateful for all of you, and we will catch you next time on The Naked Gospel.